Chris Hegadorn is a professor of global food politics and the former executive secretary of the UN Committee on World Food Security. He joins us now from Paris. Chris, this has been called the worst natural disaster of the century, but it's also been the most extraordinary international response. More than 100 countries now giving assistance. So what humanitarian efforts are we still seeing?
Well, I'm following the news very closely to see what kind of response it is, and it's the scale of this disaster is just remarkable. I don't think people here in Paris or in the United States really fully understand the scale of the destruction. This would be an earthquake affecting everything from Washington, D.C. to Hartford, Connecticut. It's an enormous number of towns, villages. And we know the damage to roads and bridges and infrastructure is just massive. So hats off. First of all, deepest condolences to everyone dealing with this, particularly families who have lost loved ones. But the response has been extraordinary. You've mentioned over 100 countries, including from my own country, from around the Arab world, from Israel, from Europe. It's tremendous, but it needs to be sustained. And the funding needs are enormous as well.
As you said, the scale is really difficult to get your head around. But Chris, we continue to see miracle stories, but as we've been hearing from our reporters on the ground, that reality is the fact that we're going to start shifting focus from search and rescue to search and recovery. So where is aid needed most now, particularly for the survivors, many of whom are lacking those basic human needs, water, food, shelter? What help are they receiving?
Well, look, here's where the United Nations plays such a key role, along with NGOs from around the world. And it's really about coordination, working with the government of Turkey, working with the government of Syria to make sure that access to these places is maintained, that sufficient supplies are there, and don't overwhelm the ability to manage this. But to a large degree, it's a question of listening to the appeals of organizations like the World Food Program, who reports to need over 77 million just for urgent food needs. But I think given the issues I focus on, which are global food security, what happens once we get past the initial search and rescue and the immediate emergency needs, there needs to be a focus on recovery, on resilience building, and making sure that the food system that's been affected by this earthquake is back functioning and functions better than previous.
Well, you talk about that recovery process and the functions that need to go ahead to make it okay. Is the next challenge going to be the healthcare situation? As we know, millions have been displaced, surviving in freezing conditions. So could we actually be in real danger of seeing a secondary disaster in the form of, say, hypothermia or the spread of disease such as cholera?
It's absolutely essential to focus on the health. Once you're past the point of saving lives that can be saved, my understanding is people by the tens of thousands are essentially sheltering in their cars or living in tents in brutally cold conditions. So yes, there's always in these situations a threat of pandemics, of illnesses spreading. So I think that's certainly an issue that the international community, in support of the governments of Turkey and Syria, need to focus on. But again, if you're back looking at these questions of food, long-term food supplies, you also need to rebuild the markets that have been destroyed. Cows still need to be milked. You need to get food to where it needs to go. So this is a long-term project. This is going to take weeks, months, but potentially years. But I think the goal should be on building back a system that functions even more effectively than before.
Well, as you say, it's going to be a really long-term process. It's not just about a relief mission, but also, as you say, rebuilding operation, which is going to cost into the billions. Will aid still be coming from countries once this falls out of international headlines? And if so, what type of aid are we going to see?
Well, look, there are conflicts raging in the region since 2011 in Syria. 3 million people have been displaced. You have conflict raging across the borders. So this is not something that's going to be resolved in the short term. But hopefully we will see diplomats do what they do best and help solve problems, end wars and conflict. This is absolutely critical. You see the conflicts in places like Afghanistan and in the Horn of Africa, and just up the road in Ukraine. These have to be dealt with. We're close to a tipping point where the number of conflicts is just simply becoming close to unsurmountable in terms of getting aid where it needs to be delivered, and having a functioning food system that makes sure that we feed the 8 billion people that we're looking to feed around the world at this point.
Yes, as you say, this is not going to be a short-term issue. It's going to be a very long time, and it's going to have a lot of support that hopefully we'll continue to see international aid coming into Turkey and Syria. But for now, Chris Hegadorn, thank you for joining.